Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to go over problems that are similar to what you are going to see on the Unit 2 test. So the first question asks me which function is best represented by the following graph. So here I have a graph. You can see here this is the vertex, and I have equations that are given in vertex form. So remember, vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And the coordinates of the vertex in this case, h and k, or what go into my equation. So here, h and k are going to be -2, 1, and that's what I'm going to plug into my equation. So my equation is going to look like y equals a times x minus -2 squared plus 1. So that minus -2, I'm going to combine that and get y equals a times x plus 2 squared plus 1. So if I match this up to my answer choices, A doesn't work, B doesn't work, and neither does D. So the correct answer is C. You can see here this has an A of -1, and I'll show you how to calculate that. So to calculate that, remember you need another point, so I'm going to choose that y-intercept, which is 0, -3. If I plug that in, I get -3 equals A times 0 plus 2 squared plus 1. So I get -3 equals a times 2 squared plus 1. So I get -3 equals 4a plus 1. So then when I subtract 1 from both sides, I get -4 equals 4a. And when I divide out 4, I get -1 equals a. So that matches up with the choice that I selected. So here it asks me what are the domain and range of -2 times x minus 4 squared plus 3. So what you're going to want to do to solve this problem is go ahead and graph this on your calculator and look at what the graph looks like. So if you look at the graph, it's a downward facing parabola, and it goes on forever. So it has its highest point at 3 and it goes down like this. So if we talk about the domain, remember we want to talk about a left and right boundary. Well, if our graph goes on forever, the domain is going to be all real numbers. And that's what happens on these questions where it gives you an equation and not a graph, is you have to form the graph on your calculator and then look at the shape of the function. So if we look at the range, you can see here there's no lowest point because this graph goes on forever in the lower direction, but there is an upper point, and that upper point is at y equals 3. So the range is going to be all values of y that are less than or equal to 3. So in this question, it asked me what are the intercepts of f of x equals x squared minus 3x minus 28. So there are two ways to solve this problem. So the first one you can graph. And what you're looking for when you look at the graph is you're going to look at the two places where your graph crosses the x-axis. So at those two places where your graph crosses the x-axis, those are going to be your intercepts. Okay, so if you choose to do it that way, you can. Otherwise, you can do this problem algebraically. And what you have to do to find the x-intercepts, remember the x-intercepts have the form x comma 0. So they're going to occur where y equals 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this equation equal to 0. Because remember, f of x equals y. So if I set that equal to 0, that 0 equals x squared minus 3x minus 28. So now I'm going to look at minus 28 and find two factors of 28 that add up to -3. So since this is a negative, I know that I have a positive and a negative factor. So let's list out the factors of 28. So I have 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7. And in this case, my b value is -3. That's negative, so I'm going to go and make all my bigger factors negative. So this is going to factor into 0 equals x plus 4 times x minus 7. So remember, when you solve these equations, you finally go through and you set each factor equal to 0. So you get x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 7 equals 0. So now you subtract 4 from both sides, you get x equals -4. And then here you add 7 to both sides and you get x equals 7. So that gives me the two intercepts, -4, 0 and 7, 0. So this is asking me for an equivalent function. So this is from the lesson that you did on converting between forms. So remember, what you need to do here is you need to first expand out this binomial, because this is in vertex form and all my answers are in standard form. So I need to expand out that binomial. So remember, I can do that by the box method, FOIL, or the distributive property. So I'm just going to do the box method. So that's x minus 2 and then x minus 2. The top left is going to be x times x, which is x squared. Top right is going to be x times negative 2, which is negative 2x. Bottom left is x times negative 2, which is negative 2x. Bottom right is negative 2 times negative 2, which is 4. So now I'm going to add up all these terms. So I have x squared minus 2x plus 4. Then I can combine these middle terms, so that gives me x squared minus 4x plus 4. So now I go back to my equation and I plug this in where I had the x minus 2 squared. So this gives me y equals 3 times x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 1. So here, since I have that 3 in front, I'm going to distribute that 3 to everything that's on the inside of the parentheses. So that's going to give me y equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 12, and I have the plus 1 at the end. Remember, anytime you see like terms, you're going to combine them. So I'm going to combine the 12 and the 1, which gives me y equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 13, which is answer choice C. So this tells me that a projectile is shot upwards from a point that is 5 feet above the ground. The table shows the height at various times. Which function best models the data after it was shot? So this is a quadratic regression problem where I need to use my calculator. Remember, time is your input variable, so that's going to go into L1. Height is your output, so that's going to go into L2. So to enter these numbers, remember you click Stat and then Edit. And enter these into L1 and L2. So then once you've done that, you've clicked Stat Edit and entered your numbers into L1 and L2. Then you're going to click Stat, arrow to calculate, and then choose option 5, which says quadratic regression. So when you do that, it'll give you the values of A, B, and C. So you have negative 16. You can write it as X or you can write it as T. So in this case, it's T. So negative 16T squared plus 108T plus 5, which is answer choice A. Okay, so this gives you the graph of g of x and asks you how it's transformed from the original parent function f of x equals x squared. So remember, f of x equals x squared is centered at the origin. It has a vertex there. And it goes through these points. Since it's f of x equals x squared, it'll go through points negative 2, 4, and 2, 4. So I'm just going to kind of sketch in that graph. It looks like this. Okay, so how does this change from that graph that's in red? So if you notice, the vertex is shifted downwards to x equals negative 3. So we can say it's translated down 3. And then also, is it stretched horizontally? Yes, you can see that it's stretched horizontally. So that's why B is the correct answer. So the quadratic functions g of x and h of x are graphed on the same grid. The vertex of h of x is 10 units below the vertex of f of x. So remember, when we're talking about the vertex being shifted down, that minus 10 is going to go on the outside. So we have a minus 10 that's going to go on the outside because it's a vertical shift downward. So we don't have, so A doesn't work because that's a plus 10 on the inside. B doesn't work because that's a plus 10 on the outside. That's going up. We don't want a minus 10 on the inside. We want the minus 10 on the outside of the parentheses, or on the outside of the square. So that's why D is the correct answer. So this asks you which quadratic function is best represented by the graph. So let's start off by reading the vertex. So the vertex is at -1, -4. So I'm going to plug that into my equation. Y equals a times x minus -1 squared plus -4. So I have y equals a times x plus 1 squared minus 4. So now I need to find the value of a. I'm going to use, let's use this y-intercept right here. Let's plug that in, 0, -3. Let's plug that in for x and y. So you get -3 equals a times 0 plus 1 squared minus 4. So you have -3 equals a times 1 squared minus 4. So you have -3 equals a minus 4. So now you add 4 to both sides and you get 1 equals a. So now we need to convert this because you can see that all our answers are in standard form. So you have y equals x plus 1 squared minus 4. You can write the 1 in front or you can leave it off. Remember, there's an implied 1 right there. So you have y equals, when I expand out the x plus 1 squared, I get x squared plus 2x plus 1. Remember, you can do the box method to expand out that binomial. So x plus 1 and x plus 1. So here you get x squared, and then here's 1x and 1x, and then 1 times 1 is 1. So you get x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1, which is x squared plus 2x plus 1. So here, when I plug that back in, I get x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 4, which gives me y equals x squared plus 2x minus 3, when I combine that 1 and minus 4. So that makes A the correct answer on this one. Okay, so here it tells me that the length of a rectangle is 12 centimeters more than its width. So I need to take that and I need to write an algebra expression for that. So the length is 12 more than, which is plus, so 12 plus the width. So this tells me the area of the rectangle is 320 centimeters squared. The situation can be expressed by this equation, w squared plus 12w minus 320 equals 0. So what is the width? So what it wants you to do is it wants you to take this equation and solve for w. Well, if you look at this, you'll notice that it's a quadratic equation. W squared plus 12w minus 320 equals 0. I don't know whether this equation is going to factor, but what I'm going to do is I can use the quadratic formula because that will solve any sort of quadratic equation as long as it's set equal to 0. So remember, the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So I get x equals -b. So let's go ahead and label a, b, and c. So a is 1, b is 12, c is -320. So -b, so -12, plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times -320. And that's divided by 2 times 1. So this gives me x equals -12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus, let's see, 4 times 1 times -320 is -1280. Since I have a minus, I can turn that into a plus. 2 minuses make a plus, and that's over 2. So this is -12 plus or minus the square root of 1424 divided by 2. So now I get two solutions from this problem. I get -12 plus the square root of 1424 over 2, and -12 minus the square root of 1424 over 2. So when I solve this, I get negative 24.9, and 12.9. So here's where I have to decide which is the correct answer. Remember that measurements can only be positive. We're talking about the width of a rectangle, so that's why 12.9 is the correct answer, and negative 24.9 is just my extra solution, so I don't need that. So 12.9 centimeters is going to be the width of that rectangle.